Hello. Hello, police. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now, before I start this video, it's important for me to mention that the author does not seek to discredit any previous accounts or versions of events leading up to the gruesome murders. He merely offers an interesting alternative scenario to be considered. It was the first time Pat had spoken. He had gone from menacing to gleeful at the thought of robbery and violence. Look, there's no point. Look, just come when you're ready, Mickey. My son Paul will drive for you. And I'm not exactly going to invite my own son if I thought there was going to be any trouble. Why didn't you do it yourself then? A sensible question from Pat. Look, I'm not in this business. If I put a crew together for it, then eventually someone will talk, and then maybe these guys come for me one day when they grow up. This way, no one but I and my son know about it. You will take the stuff off to England, so no one on the street will hear anything. Okay, makes sense. And it did to Tony. He was sold. Now all they needed was the firepower to come back next week. The meeting ended. They would be back the following Monday, tooled and ready to operate. Tony was happy and he indicated to Pat Tate to pass over the neatly folded carrier bag he had inside his jacket. It contained the 30 grand balance owed on the last lot of pills. The drive back was all about planning. Mickey would go over on the Sunday in the boat. The guns would go with Mickey. No point risking having them in the car on the Channel crossing. That would be at best rather inconvenient if they got stopped with a boot full of weapons. An invasion of France on behalf of the Cornish fishermen just wouldn't cut it as an excuse. But it all had them in stitches. The plan was set and no longer being discussed by the time they were back on English soil and their phones had logged back into the networks. Bill and the team were waiting for them to come online. Collectively, the branch team soon agreed the mood in the car was good. Whatever had happened in Holland, things must have been resolved. Pat Tate wasn't threatening death and destruction to an entire nation of tulip growers, so something positive must have been achieved. It would take careful analysis by the listeners in the Atlanta Boulevard office over the remainder of the week to establish even close to what was planned for the following Monday. By the middle of the week, concerns were growing as to why Tony Tucker was buying 2 automatic machine guns. The branch team eventually established there was to be a road trip the following Monday to Holland. Tony Tucker and Pat Tate had seemed upbeat about the trip. It wasn't in keeping with putting a hit on the Dutchman. If anything, they seemed to both agree that the Dutchman was a long-term prospect for them both, in numerous discussions they had the first day following the trip. Steele, on the other hand, might not be. That was definitely in question. Tate was continually ranting about him for one thing or another nowadays. The additional firepower wasn't likely to be for Steele. He wasn't known for holding a small armoury or housing a team of Special Forces guards. If Tate wanted Mickey dead, he had enough small arms to hand to achieve the objective. The guns definitely had something to do with Holland. The branch team had a dilemma. They didn't know what was planned. Bill could only report what he heard and what he suspected from his own analysis of the data available to him. Bill was wondering what people further up the food chain would make of a possible armed expedition to continental Europe by Tucker and his crew. Bill would make sure the reports he sent up the food chain clearly stated that he considered it a real possibility. If the powers that be were prepared to let it go ahead, then so be it. Sergeant Bill Hanley would make it clear that he considered it a serious option for the Essex boys. Bill could barely imagine the ramifications if someone ever made public that they knew about it, if the British intelligence services knew and allowed armed criminals to take weapons to Europe with the intent to do harm to citizens of that country. Wednesday evening came around and it was business as usual in Raquel's, but Tony Tucker wasn't there. He was having a quiet drink in the sleepy little town of Horndon on the Hill. The Bell Public House in Horndon had an excellent restaurant attached to it. Tony was going to get something to eat a little later. He had been planning to have dinner with his wife at 8, but had put it back to 9 p.m. The man coming to meet him wasn't someone he wanted to have dinner with. He hadn't wanted to cancel his dinner arrangements with her indoors, so he combined the two. The wife was at the table in the restaurant and already looking impatient. Tony Tucker was waiting in the bar for the arrival of the man who had called him an hour earlier. He had no idea what old bollocks the guy was going to tell him, but he always pretended to be interested. He always played up to the ego of the fat wanker, whom he secretly despised. Most of what Porky the copper told him was codswallop to ingratiate himself and collect a couple of free wraps of coke. Porky Green was now a sergeant in CID at Basildon, and the slimy kid would probably climb a good deal further up the ladder. So Tony humoured him and suffered his company. Tony had to accept on reflection that Porky had also come up with the goods on a few occasions. Every time one of his clubs was about to get a spin by his colleagues in blue, Tony had good notice. Porky usually bumped into Tony at the club, or marked Craig Rolfe's card if Tony wasn't about. That afternoon, he had called Tony and said it was important. At that very moment, a slightly sweaty and rather overweight Porky opened the door to the quiet little bar of the Bell Public House. He clocked Tony straight away, and after his usual glance around the almost empty bar, he strolled straight up. He plonked his lardy arse down on the empty bar stool beside Tony. Tony smiled his best smile and palmed a couple of wraps into Porky's clammy paws as they shook hands. Paul Green's sweaty paw was ready to receive. He knew the drill. Tony assumed the urgency of the meeting was Porky's desire for the cocaine, but he'd let it go. "So, Sergeant, what brings you out here to the sticks? Something I should know about? You know I appreciate your friendship, it means a lot to me. If there's ever anything that I can do for you, please just ask." Tony buttered up the fool. "The reason I wanted to see you, mate, is we've been put on this new bit of work." Porky was trying to make his job sound like it was some sort of credible thing. Tony suppressed the urge to laugh at the thought and leaned in all conspiratorially. "Yeah, what's that then, Paul?" "Some fella who is supposedly bringing in pills from Holland. We are on him 24/7 as of yesterday morning." Tony's ears had just pricked up a fraction. His attention level had gone from DEFCON 1 to at least 3 in a heartbeat, but he didn't give anything away. "How could that affect me, Paul? Has my name come up?" It was casual and off the cuff sounding. "No, mate, I was just marking your card, you know, in case anyone you know was parting with any greenbacks for pills on the way here from Holland. You know, the latest pills you got are really good, and I just wanted to let you know in case he's your source." "So how do you lot come to this conclusion about his character having any link to me?" Tony inquired casually. Tony knew Porky was an absolute slag, and he should really give it to him, but he played to the fat wanker's ego. The slimeball would probably end up being superintendent one day, and Tony wanted to retire easy. The good life. "I don't think so. There's no mention in the briefing about who he's serving or where it's going. I don't think we're going to get the collar, to be honest. He lives in Essex, but Suffolk old Bill running this one. They said he's using a small fishing boat and operates out of some place up there. Guy's called Mickey Steele." "Yeah, I've heard of him. Pat knows him. So what's the deal then? And how does your lot know he's your man? You know, for the pills out there at the minute." Tony's world was suddenly falling apart. He kept it together and played the unconcerned but mildly interested friend. "Well, sounds like someone's got a grasp on their books, but it's supposed to be definite, you know, solid information. But we're just keeping an eye on him for the time being. We hand him over to Suffolk when we see him heading their way. Apparently he goes out fishing, nips over to Holland and comes back with a parcel. But why ain't the Dutch old Bill nicking him and getting the supplier over there? Wouldn't that make more sense?" Tony knew the British old Bill would want the collar, but needed to ask if the Dutch old Bill were involved. It was the only question he could come up with his head going into turmoil. "As far as I know, there's no mention of anything from Holland at all. If we were coordinating with them, I probably would have heard something. You got friends in Holland, mate?" "Fucking grasses, I hate them worse than fucking cancer. Still, if you're into drug importing, I suppose you take your chances. Big money, I hear, but big risks. Might have a look at it myself one day. I could do it making a few quid, especially with the way her indoors knocks it out." Tony made fun of the last comment. He'd let the Dutch question slide unanswered for Porky. "Look, whatever you do, Tone, I'll look the other way. As long as you promise to only bring in the best Peruvian flake, and I'll get lots of free samples. Seriously, mate, I can't stand grasses either. I know we get a lot from them, but they ain't no good. You know the scumbags would throw their mum under the bus to save their own skins." Tony smiled and laughed with Porky, but inside he was in turmoil, and to add to it, the neck on this fat wanker. Porky was a grass in his own way. He was blowing his work colleagues out of the water for a few grams, and just to get his head up Tony's arse and some free cocaine. The bent copper was no better than any grass, a foot in both camps, and his mother wouldn't stand a chance with a bus. Tony thanked Porky for the courtesy. "Paul, I appreciate you looking out for me. Anything you hear is always of interest to me. Just so nice to know who's doing what in the county. You never know who might try muscling on the clubs. Right, I've got her indoors waiting through there. She's hard work if you try and separate her from her grub." Tony lightened the conversation and made a polite excuse to get rid of Porky. He needed to think. You have been listening to the book Once Upon a Time in Essex. This book is available to purchase online at Amazon and other online book retailers. Many thanks for joining me for this video. Very shortly you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, including the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Take care. Cheers.